For centuries, it was believed that the Amazon rainforest was a huge expanse of natural wilderness untouched by human hands, home to only a few tiny indigenous tribes since time immemorial. However, new research has shown that this long-standing belief is wrong, that in fact, the Amazon is not an untouched wilderness, but was once home to a monumental ancient civilization, one which has been completely missing from the history books. What we're now learning about this lost civilization is not only totally changing our understanding of human history, but perhaps has the power to change the future of humanity as we know it. If you're fascinated by the prehistoric civilizations missing from our history books, embark on a remarkable journey with our eBook, Prehistoric Megastructures. This nearly 500-page volume is packed with images and in-depth explorations of some of the most astonishing and unexplained ancient structures ever discovered, monuments that were clearly built with advanced technology from a time long forgotten. There's a limited discount on the ebook, so make sure to click the link in the description or top-pinned comment and uncover the mysteries that mainstream history refuses to acknowledge. The story begins with a man named Francisco de Orellana. Born in 1511 into a wealthy and influential Spanish family, Orrellana obtained a position as a conquistador in the New World of Central and South America in 1527, where he would pursue fame and fortune for more than a decade. In 1540, Orrellana decided to join a dangerous expedition which would head inland from Peru in an attempt to find the rich civilizations that conquistadors believed existed at the heart of the South American continent. The expedition set out in February of 1541, and to say that it did not go well would be an understatement. Across the perilous Andes Mountains and down into oppressive jungle, for months, the expedition traveled without ever coming across any signs of large-scale civilization. By December, the expedition's leader was desperate, his party starving and ill, so Orrellana was sent ahead with a group of 50 men to scout the terrain along the Coca River and look for food. When, a few days downriver, they came upon a friendly tribe camped where the Coca met the Napo River, Orrellana was eager to head back and inform the main group, but the other members of his party insisted that a return upriver would be too difficult and threatened to mutiny if they did not continue on. With no other choice, Orrellana agreed. His party followed the Napo River until, in early February of 1542, it emptied into a much larger river, a powerful body of water which would become known as the Amazon River. For months, they traveled down the mighty Amazon, with the astonishing sights they came across recorded by a Dominican friar named Gaspar de Carvajal. In his records, Carvajal described huge settlements stretching for miles along the river, including one, in his words, that stretched for 5 leagues, 12.5 to 20 miles, without there intervening any space from house to house. Running between these settlements and extending inland were fine highways, so enormous that Orrellana and his party were afraid to follow them. Particularly notable were the astounding foodstuffs these settlements enjoyed, an abundance of meats, partridges, turkeys, and fish of many sorts, as well as pineapples and avocados and plums and custard apples and other kinds of fruit, and even very good wine resembling beer. Finally, more than 6 months after they had reached the Amazon River, and a year and a half since they'd set out from Peru, Orrellana and his party exited the eastern mouth of the Amazon and sailed into the Atlantic Ocean. Returning to Europe, the incredible stories Orrellana told about his journey immediately made him an important figure, and in 1544, he was appointed governor of the new territory, receiving a commission to conquer and settle the lands. Unfortunately for Orrellana, the return trip was a disaster, and despite months spent wandering up and down the Brazilian coast, he was unable to find the mouth of the Amazon again. With his hope lost, he died in 1546, never having returned to the great river. Somewhat surprisingly, after Orellana's death, no major expeditions to the Amazon River were organized for some time. It was not until the late 1600s that Jesuit missionaries began to push into the area and establish settlements. As they did not find the civilization which Orellana had spoken about. No large populations, no houses stretching for miles, no massive highways cutting through the terrain. There was only jungle and small, sparse groups of indigenous tribes. In short order, a consensus arose that Orellana must have been a liar, the Amazon he described, nothing more than a counterfeit paradise. This consensus was only strengthened in the 20th century, when scientists began to note that the soil of the Amazon rainforest was infertile and totally unable to support large-scale agriculture. In other words, the large populations and incredible foodstuffs Orellana described simply could not have existed. And so, the opinion was solidified. The Amazon was truly an unexplored and undisturbed wilderness. Until recent years, when everything changed. In late 1992, an American anthropologist named Michael Heckenberger decided on a whim to take a little vacation in the Mato Grosso region of the Amazon River Basin in Brazil. Though he was an anthropologist, he did not intend to look for anything dramatic on this particular trip, but simply wanted to spend some quality time with the indigenous tribes in the area. By January of 1993, he had settled in with one such tribe, the Kikuro, where, recognizing Heckenberger as a man of learning, the chief of the tribe quickly told him there was a site which he needed to see. With nothing better to do, Heckenberger followed the chief to the site, where he was shown a massive ditch some 10 feet deep and more than 30 feet wide, which ran for over a mile. Beginning to haphazardly poke around in the soil, Heckenberger suddenly realized it was filled with small shards of pottery. Where had this pottery come from, he wondered. Unable to resist, Heckenberger decided to cancel the rest of his vacation and launch an official investigation into the site. In short order, he realized that he had stumbled across something amazing. The massive ditch he had been shown was but a small part of a series of earthworks and ancient sites stretching all across the region, many of them, in Heckenberger's words, significantly larger than contemporary communities. What were these sites? Had someone lived there in the past in greater numbers than the modern-day indigenous tribes? Heckenberger had to know. And so, he set about mapping and excavating sites across Mato Grosso. For 10 years, he worked until, in 2003, he would finally publish his results in Science Journal. Amazingly, Heckenberger had uncovered no less than 19 settlements, appearing every 2-3 miles throughout the area. These settlements were connected by roads up to 165 feet wide, the width of a modern 4-lane highway, which, according to Heckenberger, were positioned according to the same angles, in a way that formed a grid throughout the region. Even more unbelievably, the study revealed that the area between the settlements had been carefully managed, intentionally organized into orchards and agricultural fields. It seemed that between the settlements and the roads, the farms, and the orchards, the entire area had been utilized and developed. As Heckenberger put it, nothing is unconnected. The whole bloody landscape is connected. Based on what he'd found, Heckenberger estimated the settlements could have been home to between 2,500 and 5,000 people. Since carbon dating put their use at between 800 to 1600 CE, this meant that they would have been as large as many European cities at the same time. But how could the remains of these settlements have been hiding for so long, as generations of explorers and archaeologists traveled through the area? Heckenberger had a simple answer. The inhabitants of these settlements had built using mud brick and wood instead of stone, which was not readily available in the area. This meant that it deteriorated quickly in a tropical climate and was lost beneath the earth. Nobody had noticed because there wasn't much to notice. Indeed, without the direction of the local chief, Heckenberger himself may never have started his work. It was an astonishing find, showing that there were once more people in the region than had long been believed. But in fact, it was only the beginning. At the same time as Heckenberger was working, something else was taking place that further unraveled the growing mystery. In 1999, a Brazilian paleontologist named Alceu Ranzi was flying over the state of Acre in Brazil, some 1,000 miles to the west of Mato Grosso, when he noticed on the ground below huge earthworks seemingly carved into the terrain. Somewhere in his mind, Ranzi was already aware of the existence of these earthworks. Back in the 1970s, when Ranzi was little more than a fresh-faced geography student, he had been part of a team under researcher Ondamar Dias, which conducted a full archaeological survey of the Acre area. At the time, the Amazon rainforest was just beginning to be clear-cut for farming, and as the landscape beneath the jungle was revealed, Dias and his team recorded the existence of huge shapes and patterns in the earth. Though these earthworks were mysterious and intriguing, the findings garnered little attention. In fact, the National Program of Archaeological Research in Brazil, which had commissioned the project, didn't even announce the discovery for 11 years. But by 1999, Ranzi had become a respected scientist in his own right, and being reminded of the earthworks out the window of his plane rekindled his interest in the sites. He decided that he had to study them and find out what they were and where they had come from. Within a year, he had discovered dozens of earthworks throughout the region, circles and diamonds, hexagons and interlocking rectangles and more, each between about 300 and 1,000 feet in diameter and outlined by trenches up to 20 feet deep. Many were even approached by broad earthen avenues 165 feet wide and half a mile long. It was clear to Ranzi that these earthworks, which he and others took to calling geoglyphs, had been constructed on a large scale by humans sometime deep in the past. But who and when? The question brought researchers from around the world to Acre to begin an intensive study. By 2010, they were finally ready to publish a report on their work. According to the report, which appeared in Antiquity Journal, researchers had discovered more than 200 geoglyphs stretching across 150 miles, from Bolivia in the south through Acre to the Amazonas state in the north. Incredibly, these geoglyphs were connected by long, straight roads, giving the landscape the appearance of a geometric grid diagrammed in the earth. Researchers dated the geoglyphs from as late as 1283 CE and as early as 200 CE, in either case, long before the arrival of Europeans on the continent. Again, this showed that the long-standing consensus asserting the Amazon had never been home to significant populations of people was wrong. In fact, researchers used the expanse of the geoglyphs to estimate that the area's population may have been as high as 60,000 people. Incredible as this was, researchers insisted that they'd only begun to scratch the surface. Indeed, one of the lead researchers contended in interviews that they had found only 10% of what is actually there, while another told National Geographic that there is a lot more to discover in these places. It's never ending. Every week we find new structures. As predicted, after 2010, researchers did continue to find more and more geoglyphs across the area. By 2015, they'd noted 306 geoglyphs in Acre, and by 2017, the number was nearing 500. And then the game changed. In late 2010, a new technology had emerged which was totally revolutionizing archaeology. It was called light detection and ranging, or LIDAR for short. Simply, LIDAR fires down a grid of infrared laser beams, hundreds of thousands per second, from an aircraft at the ground below. As these beams bounce off the Earth's surface, they create data points from which the terrain can be digitally mapped, instantly revealing the Earth's surface and its archaeological features. Nowhere was LIDAR more important to archaeologists than the Amazon, where dense jungle makes it nearly impossible to see anything from the air and exceedingly difficult to traverse on foot. With LIDAR, researchers were able to, in effect, digitally deforest the Amazon, allowing them to explore huge areas that would have taken years to examine using traditional methods in a matter of days or even minutes. Suddenly, LIDAR meant that what was truly hidden in the Amazon was revealed for the world to see. The first major breakthrough came in 2018 in Brazil's Mato Grosso region, where Michael Heckenberger had become a legend for his work on the ground in the decades prior. There, researchers using LIDAR were able to uncover 81 geoglyphs near the border between Bolivia and Brazil, and choosing the 24 most intriguing sites, began to excavate. When they did, they uncovered a complicated series of interconnected road networks and farms, stretching between large fortified villages built on mounds. These villages contained causeways and large plazas, and when researchers dug into the ground, they found pottery remains and burial sites. On the surface, the work in 2018 was not totally unlike that which Michael Heckenberger had already done, if over a much larger area and in much less time. However, there was one characteristic that made it different and truly groundbreaking. The sites that they had found were far from major rivers, where people were thought to have been concentrated. This meant that an ancient civilization, rather than existing solely along riverbanks, had actually been a continuous string of settlements throughout the area and deep into the jungle. With this information, alongside data which already existed, researchers were able to construct a computer model which estimated the total population of the region. Incredibly, this model determined the population in the area must have been between 500,000 and 1 million people at its peak. This was a stunning result, dramatically increasing population estimates in the Amazon and conceptions of the civilization who had lived there. But Mato Grosso was not the only region where this type of dramatic shift was taking place. Back in Acre, where hundreds of geoglyphs had already been found, LIDAR allowed researchers to finally put the pieces of the puzzle together. In a 2020 study published in the Journal of Computer Applications in Archaeology, researchers revealed that the geoglyphs and villages found on the ground all centered around a series of mounds with radiating roads connecting them. As the study put it, the circular mound villages are connected across the wider landscape through paired sunken roads with high banks that radiate from the village circle like the marks of a clock or the rays of the sun. So astonishing was the layout, researchers came to believe that it may have been organized specifically to represent indigenous conceptions of the cosmos. While findings in Mato Grosso had forced researchers to reconceptualize the population which had existed in the Amazon, the findings at Acre forced researchers to reimagine what this ancient population was capable of. How had they built such a complex grid, one which appeared like a piece of art from the sky? As researchers pondered this question, another breakthrough took place. This one, the most stunning of all. One place we have not mentioned so far is the remote Llanos de Mojos region in Bolivia, which stands in the southwest corner of the Amazon basin between Acre and Mato Grosso. Like its neighbors to either side, on-the-ground archaeological research in the area had revealed unusual sites, including mounds rising up to 70 feet above the landscape and hundreds of miles of causeways and canals. Yet the area was so remote, so thick with jungle, that these peculiarities had never really been followed up on in the same way as they had in other regions. And as incredible discoveries emerged elsewhere, Llano de Mojos was mostly ignored. It was not until 2022 that the shocking secrets of the region were finally revealed. That year, a group of archaeologists from Germany, the UK, and Bolivia, led by a man named Heiko Prumers, published a study in Nature journal which sent the scientific world into a frenzy. Using LIDAR, Prumers and his team had discovered 26 unique settlement sites in the region, including, most spectacularly, 2 large urban centers. Known as Landivar and Katoka, these 2 urban centers were each arranged around a monumental core which contained huge raised platforms of earth topped by enormous conical pyramids, and each surrounded by 3 rings of defenses and rampart fortifications. Simply, these centers were much bigger and much more impressively developed than anything previously found in Acre or Mato Grosso. But there was more than that. In the area surrounding Landivar and Katoka was an extensive network of smaller settlements which spanned 200 square miles, all connected by roads and causeways. Stretching throughout the network were endless canals and reservoirs, evidence of an advanced hydrological system that could have been used to control water supply across the area. Unlike previous findings in Acre or Mato Grosso, where smaller settlements were roughly grouped together, this was an entire urban area centered around a system of large city centers and suburbs. As researchers described in the study, the settlement pattern represents a type of tropical low-density urbanism that has not previously been described in Amazonia. Put another way by Heiko Prumers, nobody expected that kind of society in that region, pyramids 20 meters high. The whole region has been so densely habitated during the pre-Hispanic time that's incredible to believe. There is a new civilization, new culture, waiting for us to study them. This massive discovery implied something which nobody had been expecting. As Prumers explained, we can now see that general estimates for the population of Amazonia have been too low, much too low. But everything about these sites, the scale of the large settlements, the reservoirs, the defenses, the sophisticated infrastructure, points to large populations. But just how large could these populations have been? Numerous researchers have begun to add up the numbers and use different models to estimate how many people could have lived in this previously lost Amazonian civilization. The most commonly cited estimate today suggests that at its peak, the Amazon would have been home to between 6 to 9 million people, while others say that it was surely over 10 million, and some even believe it could have been as much as 20 million. For comparison, the population of Spain when Francisco de Orellana first traveled down the Amazon River was 6.5 million. Either way, these estimates have blown the roof off anything anyone had believed possible in the region. In only a few years, the population estimates went from thousands to tens of thousands, to 1 million to millions. Does it not seem likely that the number will grow further in the future? Prumers, for one, believes it could rise. In his words, "I'm sure that in the next 10 or 20 years we'll see a lot of these cities, and some even bigger than the ones we are presenting in our paper." Take a step back. We now know that the long-standing view of mainstream science is wrong, officially and definitively disproven. There was, in fact, a massive civilization existing in the Amazon, just as Francisco de Orellana originally recorded. With this conclusively established, the question becomes, what happened to them? If the accounts of Orrellana in the 1500s were true, why did future explorers not find anything, neither a huge civilization nor even the remains of one? The prevailing answer is a tragic one. When the Europeans first arrived in South America, they brought with them diseases like smallpox and influenza, which decimated the indigenous populations who had no resistance to them. Estimates suggest that 90% of the population of South America, and perhaps as much as 99%, was wiped out by disease between the 16th and 18th centuries. Understanding this, the explanation for why no great civilization was found becomes quite simple. The population of this civilization, which once reached into the millions, was wiped out over the course of only a few generations. As people disappeared, the jungle began to take over where they had lived, covering their cities. Because they had built with mud brick and wood instead of stone, the evidence of their existence quickly deteriorated, lost beneath the jungle soil. By the time Europeans began to explore the area more thoroughly, a century and a half after the initial journey of Orrellana, there was nothing left to find, leaving them to conclude that the civilization had never existed. There is one other question which arises from the definitive proof that large populations existed in the Amazon before the arrival of Europeans. Remember, modern science has shown that poor Amazonian soil cannot support large-scale agriculture. So how did this Amazonian civilization feed a population of millions? The secret is something called Terra Preta, a near-mystical discovery which not only explains Amazonian civilization, but which may change our world in modern times. As early as the 19th century, scientists and explorers began to officially document the existence of a strange dark earth in the Amazon. Called Terra Preta, literally black earth in Portuguese, it stood in stark contrast to the normal orange-yellow soil of the Amazon, not only in color but for its extreme fertility. Knowledge of this Terra Preta was first popularized in the West by an 1879 account from an explorer named Herbert Smith, which appeared in the popular Scribner's Monthly magazine. There, Smith wrote, "The cane field itself is a splendid sight, the stalks 10 feet high in many places and as big as one's wrist. The secret was the rich Terra Preta." Despite incredible accounts like these, nobody really thought to look into Terra Preta, perhaps believing it to be little more than yet another myth. But when scientists did finally get around to studying it in the mid-20th century, they quickly came to realize that it was basically a magic soil. Within Terra Preta soil, scientists found abundant organic matter like plant residue, animal feces, and fish and animal bones, as well as tiny pottery shards. Moreover, the soil contained unusually high concentrations of low-temperature charcoal residues and extremely high levels of nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and zinc, as well as high levels of microorganic activities. Somehow, these characteristics came together to give the soil mind-blowing properties. First, not only was the soil far more fertile than normal, but it somehow maintained its nutrient levels for generations on end. Consider, modern slash-and-burn agriculture is not sustainable in the Amazon because once the land is cleared, high rainfall leaches the nutrients out of the soil. Even with modern chemical fertilizers, regular Amazonian soil cannot maintain crop yields into the third growing season. And yet, Terra Preta remains fertile year after year. A biochemist from Cornell University explained just how unusual this is. The soils retain their high fertility in an environment with high decomposition, humidity, and temperatures. In this environment, according to textbooks, this soil shouldn't exist. On top of that, Terra Preta was found to somehow regenerate itself, almost as if it was alive, meaning it could actually increase its own volume and transform poor soil into highly fertile ground. What is most interesting is that while modern science has recorded these properties, they have not yet been able to figure out how Terra Preta was made by indigenous populations. And make no mistake, they're trying. In recent years, huge investments have been made into uncovering the secrets of Terra Preta because, well, it just might save the modern world. Think about it. If scientists could figure out how to recreate the super fertile Terra Preta, crop yields could be increased around the globe, particularly in hard-to-farm areas with poor soil, without the toxic effects of fertilizer, helping to feed a modern world where over 1 billion people are currently food insecure. More than that, the high charcoal content of Terra Preta has been shown to capture substantial amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere. What might be most frustrating to modern science, as they struggle to replicate these amazing properties, is that recent research has shown that not only did the Amazonians know how to make Terra Preta, but they did so in huge quantities. As more and more settlements have been uncovered across the Amazon, Terra Preta has consistently been found around the sites. In fact, some estimates suggest that it might cover 3.2% of the total floor of the Amazon. Simply, the ancient Amazonians created and used Terra Preta as a foundation of their massive civilization, the secret which allowed them to feed a population of millions. But if Terra Preta was the foundation, it actually went so much further than that. In just the past few years, research has shown that not only is the Amazon rainforest not an untouched wilderness, but in fact, it's really more of a massive garden. Seriously, studies have determined that the ancient peoples of the Amazon have been domesticating and cultivating specific plants for thousands of years. Today, plants like the Brazil nut tree, Amazon tree grape, ice cream bean tree, and cocoa tree, the ideal plants to feed a flourishing civilization, are hyper-dominant in the Amazon. The reason is that the Amazonian civilization carefully cultivated them to ensure their abundance. When most of the population died of disease after the arrival of Europeans, these dominant plants simply ran amok, unchecked in the tropical climate, resulting in the rainforest we know today. Taken together, this leads to an incredible conclusion. Not only was there a massive and thriving civilization in the Amazon before the arrival of Europeans, but one which did things in a totally different way. While their counterparts in Europe rapidly depleted the fertility of their own lands and invested massive resources into sailing around the world to do the same in new locales, the Amazonians developed a type of sustainable fertility. As one researcher who has worked in the area put it, these people were doing something we don't seem very successful at, sustaining populations without destroying biodiversity. Put another way by a different researcher, what we're seeing with the Amazon is not so much culture versus nature, but rather a dispute between two different modes of human occupation. One which bleeds the earth dry, leading to the predicament we find ourselves in today, and the other which expands fertility and sustainability and the habitability of the planet. Here is the good news. Already, modern scientists are hunting the secrets of Amazonian Terra Preta soil, which, if discovered, could totally change our modern world. But this is one secret long lost in the Amazon. As the remainder of the more than 2 million square miles still covered by jungle gets explored, as new sites are found by LIDAR and excavated, what else might we learn? We've just added an entirely new civilization to the roster. There is little doubt that by studying them, we will gain a new understanding of humanity's history and perhaps humanity's future as well. Deep in the dense rainforests of eastern Honduras, La Ciudad Blanca, the White City, which would later be known as the Lost City of the Monkey God, has long been the stuff of legend. For centuries, Indigenous peoples spoke in hushed tones of a mysterious city of white stone hidden in the remote Mesquicha jungle, a swath of wilderness so impenetrable that outsiders seldom dared to set foot there. The Pech and Tawaka peoples know it as Kaha Kamasa, meaning White Town or White House, a sacred place where their gods and ancestors took refuge. According to one tale, when Spanish invaders arrived 500 years ago, the gods of all the native tribes fled into this secret haven to escape destruction. The legend holds that La Ciudad Blanca was a paradise of plenty. Some called it the place of cacao, an Eden-like valley rich with food, but also a forbidden sanctuary. Those who ventured there, it is said, never returned. Elders recount that its buildings shone white in the jungle gloom, perhaps built of white stone or coated in gleaming plaster. Some versions of the legend warn that the city is protected by powerful spirits. In the stories passed down by the Pech and Tawaka peoples, there's often mention of a powerful deity or idol in the form of a monkey, worshipped or feared by ancient inhabitants of a sacred jungle city. This figure is sometimes associated with chaos, fertility, or sacrifice. Some legends say the monkey god ruled over the city, demanding offerings and even human lives. The legend of the White City first reached beyond indigenous circles during the era of the Spanish conquistadors. In the 16th century, as Spain's explorers scoured the Americas for wealth and glory, whispers of a rich city hidden in the Honduran interior began to circulate. Hernán Cortés himself, the conqueror of Mexico, wrote in a 1526 letter to the King of Spain that he had received reliable reports of an undiscovered province in Honduras that would exceed Mexico in riches and equal it in the size of its towns. Such a claim, that an even more prosperous civilization lay concealed in the jungle, tantalized the Spanish. Though Cortés never found this treasure-laden province, his account planted the seed of a tantalizing mystery. A few decades later, in 1544, Cristobal de Pedraza, the Bishop of Honduras, wrote to the Spanish crown describing a strange encounter. According to his letter, he had seen or heard tell of an indigenous city of white stone deep in the eastern mountains. Local informants told the bishop that the inhabitants of this hidden city dined off plates of solid gold, a detail that fired the imaginations of all who heard it. The region in question, often called Tegucigalpa by the Spanish, remained largely outside colonial control. Its dense jungles, swamps, and fierce native defenders kept conquistadors at bay. No official expedition was ever able to verify Pedraza's story, and the Spanish never reached any white city before their colonial era ended. Yet these early rumors of gleaming white temples and untold riches became interwoven with the native myth. By the dawn of the 20th century, the mystery of La Ciudad Blanca beckoned to adventurers and archaeologists alike. The notion of a lost city hidden in Central America gained steam as explorers pushed into Honduras's uncharted jungles. In 1927, the famed aviator Charles Lindbergh allegedly peered down from his airplane over eastern Honduras and reported seeing an ancient metropolis rising out of the jungle canopy. Whether truth or tall tale, Lindbergh's story captured the public's imagination, and the name Ciudad Blanca, the White City, began appearing in newspapers and explorers' journals. Around the same time, archaeologists trekking along the Rio Platano and Patuca rivers found mysterious stone sculptures and giant grinding stones in remote villages, evidence that a sophisticated ancient culture had once thrived in Mesquitia. These tantalizing clues only heightened the allure of finding a grand lost city. In the 1930s, several expeditions penetrated the Honduran interior chasing the legend. The most celebrated effort came in 1940, when an American adventurer named Theodore Morde hacked his way through Mesquitia's swamps and mountains. Backed by the Museum of the American Indian, Morde spent months in the jungle. When he finally emerged, he electrified the world with a dramatic claim. He had found the fabled City of the Monkey God. Morde recounted discovering ancient stone roads and the massive stone walls of a ruined city overtaken by rainforest. He claimed local Petch guides led him to the site and relayed its legends, including a tale of a monkey god statue that once stood in a great plaza where ancient people performed sacrifices. The New York Times ran the headline, "City of Monkey God is believed located," and Morde returned with hundreds of artifacts to prove he'd been there. Curiously, he refused to reveal the precise location of the city, citing fears that it would be plundered by treasure hunters. He promised to return for a full excavation, but Morde never made it back. In 1954, Morde was found dead under mysterious circumstances, officially ruled a suicide, without ever divulging the location of his monkey god city. His sudden death cast a pall of uncertainty. Had he truly found it, or was it a clever fabrication? In the absence of proof, La Ciudad Blanca remained an enigma. Over the subsequent decades, rumor and speculation continued to swirl. Every so often, a new explorer would venture into Mesquitia and announce, "I found the White City," only to later discover it was another set of ruins or to produce no evidence at all. In fact, by the late 20th century, researchers knew of numerous ancient sites scattered in that wilderness, perhaps 200 or more, including several large complexes. It seemed that multiple lost cities lay hidden under the foliage, any one of which could spawn a legend. The Honduran government itself acknowledged the mystique. In 1960, it established the Ciudad Blanca Archaeological Reserve, protecting a huge swath of Mesquitia forest, an official nod to the enduring tale. Yet the one white city of legend remained elusive. The idea that somewhere deep in Mesquitia, a majestic white stone metropolis was still waiting to be found kept explorers coming, right into the 21st century. In the new millennium, technology finally provided a way to pierce Mesquitia's green veil. While many had searched on foot, hacking through vines and enduring disease, a team of explorers turned to the skies. In 2012, documentary filmmaker Steve Elkins and his colleagues, working with scientists from the University of Houston, conducted an aerial survey of a remote valley in La Mesquitia, using LIDAR technology capable of mapping ground features hidden beneath dense jungle canopy. As their small plane crisscrossed the uninhabited valley, millions of laser pulses penetrated the foliage. When the digital data was processed, the team stared in awe at the images. Outlines of plazas, earthworks, pyramid-shaped mounds, and canals emerged, unmistakably human-made structures where the map had shown only blank wilderness. It appeared they had found not just one lost city, but at least two ancient settlements previously unknown to science. The legend of Ciudad Blanca had new life, grounded now in tangible evidence from the sky. In February 2015, a joint Honduran-American expedition set out to verify one of these sites on the ground. Under the Honduran government's auspices and escorted by Special Forces soldiers to deter looters, archaeologist Christopher Fisher and a team of scientists and explorers were helicoptered into an isolated valley encircled by steep mountains. Stepping into this untouched jungle was like entering a time capsule. Wildlife abounded. Curious spider monkeys peered at the visitors, and peccaries and deer wandered unafraid, seemingly having never seen humans before. After clearing some of the overgrowth, the team found the unmistakable remnants of a lost city, earthen pyramids and platforms defining a central plaza, the toppled mounds of what had been buildings, and even the outline of an ancient ball court. Strewn about were finely carved stone artifacts just peeking from the soil. In one spot, archaeologists uncovered a cache of over 50 stone sculptures, left as if in an offering. Perhaps the inhabitants had placed these objects during a final ceremony before abandoning the city to the jungle. In any case, the cache remained undisturbed for centuries beneath layers of mud and leaves. Among them was a sensational find, the head of a half-human, half-spirit creature carved from stone. Some said it looked like a jaguar, while others said it looked like a monkey. The carving may have been part of a ceremonial seat or throne. Its fierce features and humanoid body hinted at the art and mythology of the long-lost inhabitants. The expedition carefully mapped and documented the site, but left the artifacts in place, recognizing the need for thorough professional excavation in the future. Based on preliminary analysis, the ruins likely date to around 1000 to 1500 AD, flourishing about the time when the last great Maya cities had already fallen. Yet this culture appears to be distinct from the Maya, a civilization that rose and fell in isolation, shrouded by the rainforest. The discovery was heralded around the world as the real Ciudad Blanca found at last. Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez even flew to the area and pledged to protect the valley as part of the nation's heritage. Archaeologists, while excited, were careful to note that Mesquitia holds not one but many lost cities, this newly surveyed ruin being just one piece of a larger puzzle. In any case, the legend had become reality. What had been a fable of a white city in the jungle was now confirmed. Unfortunately, it appears that the legend that whoever ventures into Ciudad Blanca is doomed has also turned real. Among the Pech and Tawaka peoples of Honduras, La Ciudad Blanca has long been considered taboo, not just sacred, but dangerous. Elders warn that it is a place protected by powerful spirits, where trespassers risk falling under a divine curse. Some versions of the legend say the city demands a sacrifice from any outsider who dares to enter. Others suggest the city is alive, guarded by unseen forces that punish those who disturb its rest. When the expedition announced its discovery in 2015, many indigenous leaders expressed deep concern. They didn't celebrate, they warned. One tribal elder said plainly, "That place was never meant to be found. It was hidden for a reason." Whether the curse is metaphorical or supernatural, the events that followed lent it chilling credibility. Weeks after leaving the jungle, several members of the expedition team began to exhibit strange and terrifying symptoms. At first, it seemed like minor sores or insect bites, but those sores didn't heal. They worsened, spreading, deepening, ulcerating into open, weeping wounds. The skin around them turned black, softening, peeling away. Antibiotics were useless. Some developed lesions on their face, arms, and neck. A few even had symptoms in the nasal cavity and mouth, which threatened to disfigure or destroy vital tissue. The diagnosis: mucocutaneous leishmaniasis, a rare and flesh-eating parasitic disease almost unknown in North America. Leishmaniasis is caused by a microscopic parasite transmitted by the bite of female sandflies, genus Lutzomia, that thrive in the humid rainforests of Central and South America. Once the parasite enters the bloodstream, it infects white blood cells and hides in tissues. The immune system reacts violently, creating sores that can last months or years, often disfiguring the patient permanently. In its mucocutaneous form, the version the team contracted, the parasite migrates from the skin to the mucous membranes of the nose, throat, and mouth, where it eats away at cartilage, soft tissue, and bone. If untreated, it can literally rot the face from the inside. Treatment is brutal. The most common is a 28-day regimen of amphotericin B, an anti-parasitic drug originally derived from mold. It's administered intravenously, and the side effects include fever, vomiting, kidney damage, and potential liver failure. Many patients don't finish the course because the cure is almost as bad as the disease. But without treatment, the disease continues eating. There is no vaccine, no guaranteed immunity, no way to fully eradicate it from the body. In all, over half the team contracted some form of leishmaniasis. Several required extended hospitalization. Some had permanent scarring. A few were told they would never fully recover, that the parasite would remain dormant in their tissues for life, waiting perhaps to flare again. The disease didn't simply sicken a few explorers. It devoured their flesh, haunted their bodies, and forced them to reckon with the cost of violating something ancient and sacred. Some members of the team later admitted that they felt the city had punished them. One called it the most beautiful and terrifying place I've ever been. The 2015 expedition to La Ciudad Blanca was, without question, one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. It proved that lost cities can still be found, that LIDAR and science can pull history from the Earth's grasp, that ancient legends may have kernels of truth. A book about the group's unbelievable escapade, written by Preston and titled The Lost City of the Monkey God, was published, while a documentary about the trip is also in production. But it also proved something darker. We are not always welcome where we tread. Many of the team members have refused to return. A few, including journalist Douglas Preston, have described the journey as both a dream come true and a nightmare that still haunts them. The valley remains closed to the public, guarded by Honduran forces and monitored by environmental agencies. The ruins are untouched, awaiting further study by archaeologists brave enough to risk their lives. Whether you see it as a curse, a biological hazard, or the price of forbidden knowledge, one thing is certain: La Ciudad Blanca demands respect. And for those who ignored the warnings, it left a mark that will never fade. In the heart of South America, hidden beneath the impenetrable green canopies of the Amazon rainforest, lies a legend so fantastical, so riddled with contradictions and implications, that it has both captivated and confounded truth seekers for decades. It is the story of Akakor, a lost underground city, and the mysterious tribe known as the Uga Mongula. Their tale unfolds through the testimony of a single man, Tatunka Nara, who claimed to be the last prince of a hidden civilization that once ruled vast subterranean domains stretching beneath Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia. The legend first entered public consciousness through the German journalist Karl Brugger, who chronicled Tatunka Nara's extraordinary account in his 1976 book, The Chronicle of Akakor. In it, Brugger presents the supposed oral history of the Uga Mongula people, allegedly passed down for thousands of years. This narrative weaves together elements of pre-flood civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, advanced technology, and massive underground cities protected from global cataclysms. According to Tatunka Nara, Akakor was not merely a city. It was a capital of an extensive subterranean network constructed by the gods, who came from the sky some 15,000 years ago. These beings, described in language echoing both myth and science fiction, supposedly arrived in shining chariots and selected the ancestors of the Uga Mongula to be the guardians of their sacred cities. The gods taught the people astronomy, agriculture, medicine, and engineering, then departed, promising to return. Before leaving, they built 13 massive underground cities, of which Akakor was the most important. These cities were described as monumental, lined with smooth, straight tunnels that extended for hundreds of kilometers, filled with artificial light, advanced ventilation, and technology that could purify water, preserve food, and manipulate gravity. Akakor, as Tatunka recounted, had 3 main levels, with temples, living quarters, military training grounds, and hidden archives. It was carved into the living rock of the Andes, reachable only through concealed mountain passes and shafts guarded by priest warriors. For millennia, it was kept secret from the outside world, a living testament to the time before the Great Flood, a global cataclysm that Tatunka claimed occurred in 10,481 BC, wiping out most of Earth's surface civilizations. The Uga Mongula, according to Tatunka, were a chosen people, entrusted with maintaining the knowledge and legacy of the gods. Their oral history allegedly spans 15,000 years, divided into epochs marked by celestial events and earthly destruction. They believed themselves to be descendants of the sky beings, and their duties included preserving ancient manuscripts, artifacts, and even energy sources left by the gods. They communicated through a lost language, and their society was highly stratified with sacred warriors, priest engineers, and memory keepers. Tatunka claimed that the Uga Mongula had engaged with other lost tribes across the continent and even waged secret wars against aggressive invaders. He accused both Spanish conquistadors and modern governments of attacking the hidden cities, desecrating sacred knowledge, and trying to suppress the truth of humankind's ancient past. According to his narrative, only 3 of the original 13 cities remained by the 20th century: Akakor, Akahim, and Akanis, each now nearly abandoned and empty, save for a few surviving guardians. The rest had been destroyed by earthquakes, invasion, or time itself. One of the most controversial aspects of Tatunka Nara's account lies in his repeated description of the gods: tall, pale-skinned, bearded beings who arrived from the stars in flying craft and imparted their wisdom to primitive humans. This motif mirrors numerous myths from ancient cultures around the world, from the Viracocha of the Andes to the Anunnaki of Mesopotamia. To some, this is evidence of a global pattern of ancient alien intervention. The ancient astronaut theory, popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken, aligns neatly with the claims in the Chronicle of Akakor. The advanced technology, the manipulation of light and gravity, and the sudden appearance of knowledge in isolated tribes are all hallmarks of this speculative framework. Others see the story as an allegory for Atlantean survivors, members of a prehistoric high civilization that fled underground after a cataclysm and guided human development from secret cities beneath the earth. In this view, Akakor becomes a South American Atlantis, hidden in plain sight. Whether extraterrestrial, Atlantean, or entirely mythic, the beings in Tatunka's story occupy a liminal space between gods and engineers, between memory and imagination. They are the gatekeepers of a golden age forever lost, and perhaps waiting to be recovered. When Karl Brugger, a well-respected German journalist and foreign correspondent, first met Tatunka Nara in Manaus in 1972, he believed he had stumbled upon the story of a lifetime. Tatunka, charismatic and articulate, introduced himself as the prince of a hidden tribe that had survived untouched by modern civilization in the jungles of Brazil. With piercing eyes and an aura of mysticism, Tatunka spoke of ancient gods, underground cities, and a sacred duty that he alone had carried for years. Brugger, intrigued and skeptical, began recording what would eventually become the Chronicle of Akakor. Published in 1976, it offered a 5,000-year historical account of the Uga Mongula, dictated by Tatunka in rich and vivid detail. The book, structured like a biblical chronicle, charted the rise and fall of underground civilizations, their battles with outside forces, and prophecies of future calamity. Tatunka spoke of a time when the gods would return, and of modern humanity's ignorance of its true origins. The book caused a stir in alternative circles. To the curious public, it was Erich von Däniken meets Plato, filled with tantalizing evidence of ancient advanced knowledge. Yet Brugger himself remained cautious. He neither wholly endorsed Tatunka's story nor dismissed it. He seemed caught between journalist and believer, recorder and disciple. Tragically, Brugger's journey would end abruptly. In 1984, while on assignment in Rio de Janeiro, he was shot dead under mysterious circumstances. The murder remains unsolved. To this day, some speculate that Brugger knew more than he revealed, perhaps preparing to publish further revelations about Akakor or Tatunka's secrets. Others believe he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the connection between the chronicler's violent end and the haunting tale he helped reveal only deepened the aura of secrecy and danger around Akakor. Tatunka Nara claimed he could guide those willing into the jungles of Acre, Rondônia, and the upper Amazon basin, where the entrances to Akakor and the other underground cities were supposedly hidden. Over the years, several Western adventurers took him up on the offer, with disturbing consequences. One of the most notable cases was John Reed, an American adventurer who disappeared in 1980 after entering the jungle with Tatunka. Reed's body was never found. Then came Herbert Warner, a Swiss backpacker who vanished in 1983 while under Tatunka's guidance. A third man, Christine Heuser, a German tourist, was also reported missing. Though Tatunka was questioned in connection with these disappearances, no charges were ever filed. His story never wavered. He was the last descendant of the Uga Mongula, and the world was not ready for what lay beneath. By the late 1980s, a few journalists and filmmakers decided to dig deeper. Among them was Rüdiger Neberg, a German survivalist and documentarian. Neberg was determined to expose the truth about Tatunka Nara. After an extensive investigation, he discovered that Tatunka was not a jungle prince, but a German man named Günther Hauck, a former Navy deserter and survival enthusiast who had fled Germany in the 1960s. Hauck had reinvented himself as an indigenous leader and convinced dozens of people of his invented identity. Neberg's expose triggered a wave of skepticism. The media labeled Tatunka Nara a con man, the Chronicle of Akakor a hoax, and Karl Brugger a dupe. But curiously, even as evidence mounted that Tatunka was a fraud, no physical traces were ever found of the missing tourists. The jungle had swallowed them whole, and with it, perhaps, some lingering sliver of truth. With Tatunka's identity unmasked and multiple missing persons linked to his name, many were quick to declare the entire story of Akakor a fabrication, a dangerous fantasy spun by a skilled liar. Yet, the depth and consistency of his story puzzled even hardened skeptics. His knowledge of South American indigenous cosmology, his precise recall of names, dates, and rituals, and his confident descriptions of underground cities left many with the nagging feeling that something more was at play. The idea emerged that Tatunka had fused myth and memory, creating a hybrid legend with elements of truth, folklore, and fabrication. Perhaps he had heard genuine tribal legends during his time in the jungle. Perhaps there were real ruins, stone cities swallowed by vegetation, that he exaggerated into mythic proportions. Or perhaps, as some claim, Tatunka was a tool, an unwitting mouthpiece for ancient knowledge passed to him through dreams, visions, or even non-human intelligence. The story took another eerie twist when later documentaries showed Tatunka guiding tourists in the jungle well into the 1990s, still dressed in traditional garb, still telling the story of Akakor. At times charming, other times volatile, he remained enigmatic to the end. He never admitted to lying. He never recanted. He always said, "I told the truth. The world just wasn't ready." Despite the hoax allegations, belief in Akakor and the Uga Mongula has not died. In fact, recent developments in Amazonian archaeology have begun to change the way scholars view ancient South America. LIDAR scans have revealed massive earthworks, road systems, and urban planning in regions once believed to be uninhabited. The Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia and the Xingu Basin in Brazil show signs of ancient societies building vast, geo-engineered landscapes, complete with raised causeways and canals. Terra Preta, a mysterious black soil created by ancient people, indicates that large, complex civilizations thrived in the Amazon long before European contact. Could it be that Akakor, like Atlantis, is not a literal place, but a mythic memory of real cities lost to time and jungle? There's also growing interest in underground structures, subterranean tunnels, cave systems, and legends of underworld cities appear in Andean, Amazonian, and Mesoamerican mythologies. The Incas spoke of Chincana, labyrinthine tunnels beneath Cusco. The Maya believed in Xibalba, the underworld of gods and spirits entered through caves. Indigenous Brazilian tribes spoke of cities beneath the earth, where their ancestors took refuge from the sky god's wrath. Perhaps Tatunka's tale, even if wrapped in invention, was tapping into this pan-cultural memory of underground sanctuaries, real or symbolic. Akakor and the Uga Mongula may never be verified by archaeology. Tatunka Nara may have been a con artist, a mystic, or both. Karl Brugger may have died because of bad luck, or because he learned too much. The stories may be lies, or they may be masks hiding deeper truths. But the legend lives on because it resonates. It tells us that beneath the surface of what we know lies another world, of history forgotten, civilizations erased, wisdom buried. And perhaps, in listening to these stories, we are not just chasing fantasy. We are remembering something our ancestors tried to pass on. That truth, like cities of stone beneath the earth, is often hidden, waiting for the right moment or the right seeker to be uncovered. There are a number of ancient cities considered myths by most authors that some believe existed before written history in different places on Earth. The lost city of Z, just like Atlantis, is one such mysterious place. There is an extremely interesting document referred to as Manuscript 512, located in the Brazilian National Library in Rio de Janeiro. It mentions how a group of explorers stumbled upon a ruined ancient city in the eastern parts of Brazil in 1753. This magnificent stone city was unlike any other city they've ever seen, with architecture early reminiscent of that of ancient Greece and mysterious writings not native to the region. The most famous person to ever search for this lost city was a man called Colonel Percy Harrison Faucet, a renowned explorer who tried discovering the long-lost city thought to remain hidden somewhere in the Amazon jungle. According to myths and legends, the lost city of Z would have been erected in very ancient times by the descendants of Atlantis. It is believed that the Atlanteans who survived the destruction of their home escaped to a number of different regions on Earth, and some of them ended up in the Amazon where they eventually settled down. Colonel Faucet made 8 expeditions, disappearing in the last one under very strange circumstances. Did he find the lost city of Z in the Amazonian jungle? Could the lost city of Z be connected to El Dorado and Atlantis? And what exactly happened to Colonel Faucet in his last expedition? During the Age of Exploration, stories of lost mythical cities were very popular. But where do stories about massive cities made of gold inhabited by powerful beings come from? We can say that part of the stories come from the Old Continent. Many years after Plato's description of Atlantis, when the European explorers began arriving at the Americas, the myths and legends of supernatural creatures and pseudo-human tribes slowly gave way to stories of massive ancient cities hidden in the heart of the jungle. But what exactly is the reason? Some authors would argue that thanks to the abundance of indigenous communities that the Europeans faced, their exuberant religious rites fed the European fantasies which quickly spread. Thinking of a great civilization whose wealth one cannot imagine was quickly acknowledged as a common idea. An idea that would later, according to many authors, become known as the Legend of El Dorado, and that, moreover, satisfied the delirious hunger for gold of the first and several of the following visitors to the continent. Legends of such wealthy abandoned cities served as a perfect inspiration for thousands of explorers, conquistadors, and settlers to dive fearlessly into the unknown. However, that's not the case of the lost city of Z. What's different about this magnificent city is that, unlike the other myths and legends, there is actual evidence of its existence. Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett was a British explorer who named the lost city of Z in 1912 after finding an ancient document titled Manuscript 512. The document, called Manuscript 512, is believed to have been authored by a Portuguese bandeirante. The bandeirantes were 17th-century Portuguese settlers in Brazil and fortune hunters. Though they originally aimed to capture and enslave Native Americans, the bandeirantes later began to focus their expeditions on finding gold, silver, and diamond mines. As they ventured into unmapped regions in search of profit and adventure, they expanded the effective borders of the Brazilian colony. One of these bandeirantes was João da Silva Guimarães, the man who discovered the ruins of a mighty ancient city containing arches, statues, and temples covered in hieroglyphs, deep in the Amazonian jungle in the year of 1753. The mysterious Manuscript 512 was written by this man, and in it, he described the city in great detail, although he did not give its location. The enigmatic manuscript is completed with curious details, such as documenting the discovery of a bag of gold coins bearing the silhouette of an archer and a crown, or the reproduction of hieroglyphs copied from various corners of the city, which some say bear an uncanny similarity with Greek and Phoenician letters. These strange characters were engraved on the great stones, sealing the vault of treasure that the bandeirantes could not open. Access to the original manuscript in the National Library of Brazil is extremely limited at present, although a digital version of this became available with a digital update of the National Library. The fascinating manuscript was discovered many years later and inspired many explorers to search for the lost city. The most prominent of these explorers was the man who discovered the letter, Colonel Percy Fawcett. Colonel Percy Fawcett, who became extremely obsessed with the manuscript, was the leader of numerous expeditions. He made 7 expeditions between 1906 and 1924, even returning home to serve in the First World War. Throughout his many travels, Fawcett had heard rumors of a secret ancient underground city located somewhere in the jungles of Chile, which, according to tales, legends, and reports, was made of streets paved with silver and roofs of gold. After discovering the manuscript, which confirmed the existence of this enigmatic city, Fawcett was sure it was real, and it was out there in the depths of the jungles, waiting to be discovered. Fawcett wrote about the lost city of Z in a letter to his son in 1912. "I expect the ruins to be monolithic in character, more ancient than the oldest Egyptian discoveries. Judging by inscriptions found in many parts of Brazil, the inhabitants used an alphabetical writing allied to many ancient European and Asian scripts. There are rumors, too, of a strange source of light in the buildings, a phenomenon that filled with terror the Indians who claimed to have seen it. The central place I call Z. Our main objective is in a valley surmounted by lofty mountains. The valley is about 10 miles wide, and the city is on an eminence in the middle of it. Are approached by a barreled roadway of stone. The houses are low and windowless, and there is a pyramidal temple. The inhabitants of the place are fairly numerous. They keep domestic animals, and they have well-developed mines in the surrounding hills. Not far away is a second town, but the people living in it are of an inferior order to those of Z. Farther to the south is another large city, half buried and completely destroyed. Judging by this letter, Colonel Faucet fervently believed in the existence of this city, and he was determined to be the man who would discover it. In 1920, he made a solo attempt to search for Z, but ended it after suffering from a fever and shooting his pack animal. After 5 years of preparation, in March of 1925, with funding from a London-based group of financiers known as the Glove and the Royal Geographic Society, Faucet returned to Brazil with his eldest son Jack and Jack's best and longtime friend for an exploratory expedition to find the lost city of Z. Faucet left instructions stating that if the expedition did not return, no rescue expedition should be sent lest the rescuers suffer his fate. Faucet, having years of experience traveling, was very prepared this time. He had brought equipment such as canned foods, powdered milk, guns, flares, a sextant, and a chronometer. His travel companions were both chosen for their health, ability, and loyalty to each other. Faucet chose only 2 companions in order to travel lighter and with less notice to native tribes, as some were hostile towards outsiders. He was certain that his expedition would culminate with the discovery of the mythical city. In May of 1925, the expeditions had reached the edge of uncharted territory, exploring an area that no foreigner had ever dared cross. Faucet's beliefs were greatly influenced by what the Indians had told him about alleged lost cities spread across the Amazon jungle. Even his penultimate letter mentions one such tale. Correspondence from Colonel Faucet dated May 20th, 1925 reads, "I saw the Indian chief Roberto and had a talk with him. Under the expanding influence of wine, he corroborated all my Cuyaba friend told me and more. Owing to what his grandfather had told him, he always wanted to make the journey to the waterfall, but is now too old. He is of the opinion that bad Indians are numerous there, but committed himself to the statement that his ancestors had built the old cities. This I am inclined to doubt, for he, like the Mekinaku Indians, is of the brown or Polynesian type, and it is the fair or red type I associate with the cities." The team traveled into territory that no one had ever seen. They faced many dangers, but they wouldn't give up. Eventually, they reached an area called Dead Horse Camp when Faucet sent back dispatches for another 5 months, finally stopping after the 5th. In this dispatch, on the 29th of May 1925, he would send a letter to his wife. "My dear Nina, the attempt to write is fraught with much difficulty, thanks to the legions of flies that pester one from dawn till dusk, and sometimes all through the night. The worst are the tiny ones that are smaller than a pinhead, almost invisible, but sting like a mosquito. Clouds of them are always present. Millions of bees add to the plague and other bugs galore, stinging horrors that get all over one's hands. Even the head nets won't keep them out, and as for mosquito nets, the pests fly through them. It is quite maddening. We hope to get through this region in a few days, and are camped here for a while to arrange for the return of the peons, who are anxious to get back, having had enough of it. And I don't blame them. We go on with 8 animals, 3 saddle mules, 4 cargo mules, and a madrina, a leading animal which keeps the others together. Jack is well and fit and getting stronger every day, even though he suffers a bit from insects. I myself am bitten or stung by ticks, and these piums, as they call the tiny ones, all over the body. It is Raleigh I am anxious about. He still has one leg in a bandage but won't go back. So far, we have plenty of food and no need to walk, but I'm not sure how long this will last. There may be little for the animals to eat as we head further in. I cannot hope to stand up on this journey better than Jack or Raleigh, my extra years tell, though I do my best to make up for it with enthusiasm. But I had to do this. I calculate that I shall contact the Indians in about a week, perhaps 10 days, when we should be able to reach the much-talked-about waterfall. Here we are at Dead Horse Camp, latitude 110:43 south and 54:35 west, the spot where my horse died in 1920. Only his white bones remain. We can bathe ourselves here, but the insects make it a matter of great haste. Nevertheless, the season is good. It is very cold at night and fresh in the morning, but the insects and heat are out in full force come midday, and from then until evening it is sheer misery in camp. You need have no fear of any failure. Those were the final words of Colonel Percy Harrison Faucet. 2 years passed, and nothing was heard from him, his son, and the men who followed them. One of the most famous explorers in history, along with all of the members of his expedition, had completely disappeared without any trace, and no one had an idea of what happened to them. This resulted in many expeditions being launched in order to find them. Mysteriously, each expedition suffered the same fate as Faucet's. Everyone who followed in the footsteps of Colonel Faucet disappeared completely or lost their lives during the attempt. Faucet's disappearance resulted in a total of 13 expeditions being mounted, in which more than 100 people lost their lives, attempting to find not only Faucet, but the legendary lost city of Z as well. No one knows what exactly happened to Faucet, his expedition, and to more than 100 people that set out to search for him. Numerous theories were proposed eventually. Some say Faucet and his team were killed by an Amazonian tribe, while others suggest they may have starved, drowned, or suffered from a disease. There are some who say that Faucet and his team reached the lost city of Z and perhaps spent their last days there. Perhaps the lost city of Z is still somewhere out there in the depths of the Amazon jungle. Perhaps we'll never discover its whereabouts.